So here's the little summary section where I show you the unit. I spent under $100 on materials, and that includes electricity and includes a bit for food to power me through the 60 man-hours of labor it took to refurbish these cabinets, kind of make my own granite countertop and trim, including there's actually a granite baseboard matching underneath the cabinet that it's not like shown in this little clip. This is an Ikea kitchen cabinet. It was free on Craigslist. It needed the edges. There's like veneer wood around the edges that needed to be like re-glued and nailed to the particle board. It's not exactly a great system, but their hardware is great. And the rest of the video is mostly just a hodgepodge of assembly footage with some commentary, and there will be a timeline in the description. Your project will obviously be different, and I wish you good luck with whatever you're doing. The key to cheap kitchen cabinets is basically getting everything free on Craigslist. You might have to buy tools to shape your granite and materials to adhere your granite. And the tools to polish granite can be fairly expensive. You'll want probably a variable speed polisher. Otherwise, you just get a low speed grinder that's compatible with your dry polishing pads. So you could spend a few $100 on tools. These are some cheap Ikea cabinets. By cheap, I mean cheaply built.
Usually there's rails that come forward underneath with adjustable feet. This doesn't have that, although it did come with some hardware. It might have some feet in here. But I'm going to use my own feet with heavy-duty grade 8 bolts and nuts. And then the supports underneath are going to be made of steel channel at 10-foot spans. Each of these beams is rated to hold 1,000 pounds. So for a smaller span, it should be fine. So cheap cabinets, free on Craigslist. I'm going to use some cabinet grade countertop underneath the granite. And then I got this granite for free on Craigslist over here. And I'll be making countertops out of that. It's a relatively soft species of granite that's filled with resin, but it looks pretty, so I guess that's good enough. It's a lot better than the formica crap that's on there. And the beams were free on Craigslist. I just had to cut them and remove them. So materials cost is going to be under $100, that's for sure. Tooling costs if you're going to do a similar project. You might have to spend like $400 or $500 on tools.
Alpha wet polisher, $160. The polishing pads, $40 or less. Skill saw, hole saw, reciprocating saw, screwdriver, pliers, la la la.
This is the sink I'll be using. It was free on Craigslist. I will not be using
that faucet. I'll be using a $300 retailing faucet that I got for free on Craigslist that is located at the job site. Okay, I'm going to be cutting these beams to about a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch less than the width of the whole counters.
Alright, I'll be using this set of drawers, that.
I also had a few inches to fill, so I made my own little custom like baking pan cabinet.
And I needed to support those, so I measured the widths, and then this is my back support that goes along the rear, and these legs.
I planned on doing multiple like long support beams and having these be the feet between them, but I just used them as offshoots from the rear. I need extremely adjustable feet in this circumstance because I'm planning on doing a granite slab floor after this kitchen cabinet is installed, and I need the feet to be adjustable to like 1.5 inches. And when I do that floor, it actually becomes flat, and currently it's not flat, so it needs to be like totally adjustable for it to all like settle right after being installed a second time on a different floor. It turned out though that the kind of crazy lady who lived there ended up getting kicked out for not letting me treat for termites due to like fear of what her meth mind imagined. And I never did install this early, so I only ended up installing this on top of an already existing granite slab floor.
So you grind it so you can weld it, and I'm drilling holes so that the feet go through. I can make the feet fairly flush if I want to.
Basically, drill big holes that are less big than big nuts, weld the nuts on, and then those through bolts that go through are your adjustable feet. Thank goodness for this free on Craigslist drill press that was fully functional. I tried to find who gave it to me and thank them, but I lost their information, which usually is what happens. It's sad. These people should be thanked. If I had a hole saw at this point, I'd use it, but I didn't.
Okay, I got my $125 welder. Gotta weld these together.
You'll notice some like shiny silver colored metal brackets that are attached to the end of the feet, and those are to hold like an aluminum crossbeam that I can install after the fact. So I can leave it open, then adjust the feet, and then install the aluminum crossbeams. Here is the installation of the foot assembly. I use grade 8 bolts because I don't have stainless, and I'm using stainless nuts.
The following problems are only existent on farticle board bullshit type kitchen cabinets. So hopefully you have a superior kitchen cabinet to work with. Things I gotta do are this is particle board obviously, and there's been swelling and moisture damage, and there was just a sliver of real wood that was along the bottom here. It's begun to separate in a bunch of places. I could remove it and clean it all off and all that crap, but I'm not going to really do all that. I'll just fill it with glue and then put some ring shank nails or some screws in there.
Obviously not going to win any beauty contests, but it'll be better than what's there.
If I put screws in there, then I'll have to pre-drill the wood so that the screw can go all the way in, so that the wood's flush and there's no screw sticking out of the edge, because that would interrupt door functionality. Now this drawer is extra, and I'm going to remove both of these wood trim pieces carefully, and then I will place them on the bottom here and nail them in. Now the back of this sink area had this piece of shear panel, which is flimsy and has a giant cutout that does not fit the cutout that I need. So there's an extra one that I got off of a different same size cabinet. I put it somewhere, I don't remember, but it's solid. So I'll put that back along here, and it goes in between the lip ends right there, and same on the bottom, but there isn't quite such that thing on the top. And you put ring shank nails into it, and then that's your shear panel. You know, a piece of plywood would properly fix the problem, but I don't want to spend 20 bucks on a piece of plywood. So because of the flimsy nature of these cabinets, along with a lot of other shitty, stupid cabinets, the solution to the lack of shear value that resists forces that direction and pulling forces as well is a long strip. Goes along the back. This is plexiglass. That's what I'm going to be using. Most people use wood, but I don't have wood that I want to use. So you screw that onto the wall at a certain level, and then you bolt this to the plexiglass all along the kitchen cabinet. That secures the back of the kitchen cabinet from side to side, as well as pulling forces. So a lot of that could be fixed just with a big ass sheet of plywood. Cabinet grade's best, but at the base here you can see that there's some swelling and rotting, and that's because sinks leak and people put wet dishes down here, and this wood absorbs the moisture, and particularly with particle board and cheap plywood, it absorbs the moisture and it expands, and the glues fall apart. Piece of shit. So you gotta put something in there that's waterproof. You gotta protect the bases from getting water damage in the future. So I'm going to be cutting a piece of granite, putting it down there, and cutting some granite sidewalls and a granite backsplash. So if the sink leaks, it'll all be siliconed in there. The water will go out the front. Granite is slightly porous, but not really appreciably porous, so the water will escape instead of saturating into the wood.
I will layer my adhesive such that it slopes forward.
If you have larger drawers, sometimes there are rods that extend from here to the back of the drawer, and those unscrew in one direction, but you don't take those off initially. This is an Akurum drawer, and I'm going to be taking it apart.
Akurum is a specific line of Ikea cabinets.
I want to save some of this wood trim because they often fall off and I need to fix another drawer that has the trim that fell off, and I'll attach it in a less aesthetically pleasing but more fixable manner where it doesn't simply fall off, aka I'll use fasteners instead of just glue. This is a razor that I wish was sharper.
At this point, I was literally too cheap to change the razor. Sad.
But I don't wish it enough to do anything about it.
Being that cheap will destroy your back and make your life less happy.
Just use a straight razor. You don't need a spatula, but I like the spatula.
Oh yeah, built so tough.
That's how you remove trim from these drawers. To remove the handle, which is a nice handle, by the way.
Yeah, I used a few of those handles on my front gate, which is like 300 pounds, and I really wrench on that gate just like in a hurry, and they're still fine. So it'll hold a frickin' kitchen drawer, my God, and it's stainless steel.
It's non-magnetic, so it's not going to rust. These screws are shit, though. They're just galvanized. Just Phillips head screwdriver. Got that handle. Now, taking off the drawer face. Not too bad if I pull. Yeah, the little tiny clips, not very strong. Although, it's not like I need to catch bullets, so. Obviously done the job. That little screw likes to fall in. You can rescue that later. Otherwise, you could tilt this drawer up on its side, and then the screw won't have anywhere to fall. But this way, they like to fall in. So that exposes these. And the bottom screws are easy because, like a direct line of sight. But the top screws aren't so easy. So this is the piece you're looking at, and this is the difficult screw that we need to get at. So there's this spring here with a rod in the middle of it, and usually it's attached to that notch, and you can stick a screwdriver in here and push on the metal rod, and that frees it from here, and that releases the whole mechanism. But then you're left with this, and it's a pain in the ass to put back together because there's no like special screwdriver notch where you can put the screwdriver to push it in when you reassemble it. So it's not worth it to me to disassemble it. If I did disassemble it, it would be really easy to access this screw. But definitely not worth it for me. You could probably come in with a regular screwdriver. You can. That's really easy to access with a regular screwdriver. So just do it that way, probably. And that way you won't lose this screw because it can't even escape. So that's the drawer face. Now, oh, there's those two screws that. So it's pretty smooth. So these drawers are held on to the farticle board, laminated farticle board, by these crimped metal sections. So and they're held into the back here by these plastic clips, which really aren't that sturdy. So I'm going to cut in and loosen up the plastic clip a little bit. These crimp areas that are pushed in insert into a little channel that's in here. You should be able to remove this board. And save your hardware. So that's that. you don't really have many options for the board width, unless you want to cut these and then weld them back together to whatever width you need for your drawer. So that's one of the problems with this system. These prongs, which insert through these holes. Got the back of the kitchen sink area facing up. I have cleaned out the majority of the debris in this channel. And now I'm going to attach the replacement board that was extracted from another unit. It already has the holes lined up, fortunately.
Stainless ring shank nails. Okay, I'm putting the cabinets on the support assembly, and I'm going to build like an extension there for the pans. Checking the gaps in between the cabinets. That one's good. This one's not. Screw them together. And sometimes rooms aren't square. So if you open the drawer and that's in the corner of the room, it might impact the wall. So you might want to add a spacer depending on your room and depending on the kitchen cabinet build. If the drawer edge is like right next to the wall, if you don't add anything.
Just goes flush to the wall. So I'm going to get to screwing this together, making sure all the corners are in the right spots. And then I can measure what kind of cabinet I need to build for over here. My screws need to be of length that's not going to protrude through the other side, and diameter that's going to actually grip into this shitty particle board. And these were the screws that were actually used to do that when they were installed at the other location. So they're kind of, I'd guess, the minimum spec, and you're going to want a bunch of them if you're using small diameter screws like this, because that particle board really is fragile and it doesn't have a whole lot of holding power. It's worse than OSB. Got a pre-drill, some fastening points, and your supporting members. Now this countertop is delaminated, and adhesion would be poor if I was to adhere a granite slab to the material here, so I'm going to remove it. The easiest way I'm finding to remove it is with this floor scraper, and going along slowly, not pulling up too hard because it likes to crack. Looks like they put more adhesive around the sink. That's good. Fortunately, they used like a soft glue instead of epoxy.
Trying to remove that wood front piece, but it ends up splitting, so I end up needing to cut it off instead of pry it off.
Well, it's a nice quality plywood, but it doesn't separate very easily. So it's kind of a pain in the ass. Okay, now my plywood isn't big enough to do a whole stand, unfortunately. So I'm going to need to cut it into pieces, and the easiest way is to make one that's 30 by. There's going to be a support board that goes along the rear, and this will give a little extra support along the back where the granite is. So if I do 24 3/4 by 30, then I'll have a piece of plywood that'll cover this. So this has a smaller opening, and this has a bigger opening. The way that the sink hooks work, if I don't want to build my own sink hooks, and that takes like 4 hours to custom build one, then I have to go to the hardware store and get a bunch of stainless steel screws of a specific length and stuff. If I want to use standard clips, then I want the larger one. So, and then I want to cut the granite to be the size of the smaller hole. So this is the piece of plywood I'm going to cut the opening by. That's 25.5. So half of 25.5 is 12 3/4. Yeah. So that's my center line. Okay, 12 3/4. So now I need to go 15 in each. Wow. Barely deep enough. Okay, now that the unit that this is going into is a very small unit with a low sloping roof, and it seems that only especially short women rent this unit. So the counter height shouldn't be terribly high. So ideally we put the granite just on top of this, then it would be slightly shorter than the average countertop. And that would present some problems though, because these beams are flexible. So we got to rigid up these beams. Guess I'll rigid up that one too.
This whole situation could be solved by just a 1/2 inch thick plate of stainless steel that goes over the whole thing. It's the countertop, it's the rigidness, it's stronger than anything in a kitchen. But it's so expensive. Not if you use 430 stainless. 430 stainless is like 18% chromium and the rest is steel, and it's really rust resistant. It's not as great, quite as great as like your kitchen sink. Depending on your kitchen sink, it might be the actual alloy of your kitchen sink. It depends. But chromium concentrate is $300 per ton, and that's only 19%, and the rest is basically just iron and low carbon iron. It's pretty cheap, but it's not popular, so then it's expensive.
And fill this in with plywood. And I can't protrude past here. These are my markings for where my holes are going to be drilled. I have to drill holes so that I can get the sink clip to attach in there. Now, the sink clip goes in this little rail. And the way I'm going to have to do this is I'm going to have to put these in the rail, position them where they need to go, which are going to line up with holes in that plywood. And that'll allow this clip portion to snug up to the plywood. I would get some longer one of these, but can't seem to find it. So they're pretty limited types of hardware for putting these sinks in.
Okay, you can see there is a reinforcing beam that I'm throwing some screws into. I'm using nuts as spacers, just because they're the right thickness to account for those metal brackets that are up in there. Metal brackets and screws that keep the reinforcing beam from mating directly with the wood that's above the reinforcing beam. If I didn't use the spacers, then I'd end up with a bow as the top layer is sucked into the bottom layer. And it's got to be rigid and flat so that somebody can actually stand on the granite that's going to be on top of this. And since the granite is not very wide, and it's a 2 centimeter instead of a 3 centimeter granite, it's not going to be very strong. This project would have been a lot easier if I had just went out and purchased a proper thickness piece of plywood instead of scabbing together a bunch of smaller pieces of used plywood. And since I had to separate the wooden portions, then the places that were glued became removed from the plywood, and I have to fill in those voids later. Just trying to make this hodgepodge assembly flat and solid. Would be a lot easier using a single piece of material. Oh no, I swear, I'm trying to make it beautiful. I think exposed screws are beautiful.
Mark, mark, mark. Mark, 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 mark.
Just drilling the holes to make it a lot easier to install those clips later. It was still really hard to install them later. Just super awkward. Glad I got a cordless one of those now. That cord's a pain in the ass. Just trial fitting it with the clips, making sure I can get it done when it gets to the job site without any problems. By the way, if you're doing slab work and you don't have a tilt-up table, either one of those or a helper, then I would strongly caution you against doing this work because it can really ruin your back. Not a bad free on Craigslist table though, eh? The professional granite installer that I got it from said that it was his favorite table that he ever used. It's heavy. Using a clamp to hold down that power button, oh my god, that'll save your hand. I think some of those wet skill saws have like locking triggers, but this one didn't. See that imprint on the sink? I want to use a hole saw that will cut a hole in the granite so that the imprint can go down into it. And that one works. These diamond hole saws are like, I don't know, $8 on Amazon. They're not like the professional ones. They're not as fast, they're not as sturdy, they're not as round, but they do a job, you know. They make a hole or four, and then they're done.
Now we're going to take the wet polisher and all these Velcro backed pads, and first thing I'm going to do is take off all the edging of this fiber because it likes to show its ugly head, so you just remove it and then it won't show at the edges. And then all the cut edges that are going to be exposed, I'm going to try to make them smooth. The bottom of the countertop that's going to be exposed, that's got to get smoothed out.
Just sharp, but they also need to be polished so that they're smooth, so that they look pretty. If you need to polish multiple flat edges at the same time, then it can help to stack them up on top of each other.
If this camera had time-lapse mode, I would have recorded all that, but it was like 3 hours or something. Just to maybe 2 hours polishing these edges. So I can't really record that without a lot of hassle. But anyway, it's really smooth. And I got a rounded edge. It's nice and comfortable on my finger. And it's pretty decent. A polisher, you can get a wet polisher with variable speed. You're going to need variable speed, or at least slow speed, for these pads. You can get the polishers for like, I think, $160 on eBay. And the pads are like $50. Comes with a foam and Velcro backer. And you want to make sure it's a resin type instead of a foam type. I've never seen a foam type. Just Fair warning on that one. And if you really want to do a high quality job, it's going to take a lot of time, because you're going to have to like meticulously, like you're going to have to spend a lot of time on each surface with each pad to make sure that you basically scratch out all the larger scratches that were left by the previous pad or the cutting wheel or whatever. And so doing a professional job takes hours and hours and hours and hours. So usually they don't like resurface granite tops, they just like replace them. And you know how that expensive that is, right? But the resurfacing is even more expensive because it's so damn time consuming to do, you know, with one of these machines. Back at the slab yard where they have like 50 polishers all on the same slab, it's like 6 minutes to polish the whole thing. But, you know, by hand it's like ridiculously time consuming. So you're probably not going to do a professional job, but it's just really important if you do want to do a professional job to take a lot of time on each polishing pad. And around the edges here, it's an extra pain in the ass. So you're going to have to utilize some of the flexibility in these pads to get at least a few degrees of coverage, because there's a continual arc. So as you press in, you're going to get like maybe 10 or 20 degrees of the arc polished or sanded on each pass. So it's a real pain in the ass if you want to do a perfect job. You can get away with a thinner, less supportive support underneath here with a bull-nosed front. And that, if you want a bull-nosed front, then you're going to have to get some countertop epoxy and like a lot of clamps. You're going to want to clamp like ideally every 4 inches or so. But if you put like a 2x4 or a 4x4 in between there, then you can get away with fewer clamps, because the extra material above and below helps spread the forces from the clamps more evenly. So epoxy and a bunch of clamps. And the advantage of a bull nose is that when water drips down here, it drips off the edge of the bull nose. That's in addition to the advantage of being less breakable along this area. So that's just something to consider. And then also, if you really want to do a professional job of the bull nose, then you get a bull nose bit set. Oh God, it's really expensive just to get a fucking bull nose on the edge of it. And you want to save like all your cutting dust, and then you intermix a portion of that into the epoxy, but not so much that the epoxy, like, there's only a certain specification of like foreign material that you can introduce to the epoxy mix before it's not up to spec anymore. So you want to add the dust to your epoxy from the granite slab that you cut. Real pain in the ass. So I think this is a good compromise, just having a slightly rounded edge.
Since that top surface isn't flat, I'm just going to install it like a big tile. And the grooves in tile mortar help to basically make the surface that contacts the tile even if the floor, or in this case the counter surface, is uneven. Definitely one of the larger tiles that I've installed. Now, the reason I'm installing this without having pre-cut the whole sink is because I'm a one-man gang and I have to lift it by the center, and I'm not confident that if I lifted it by the center when the center was cut out, that the granite would survive. Also, since it's so awkward to like lay that thing down, yeah, some really bad forces would go on those skinny pieces and I might break it. So I cut it later instead. And since it's a used sink, I gotta clean it up first.
You want to test fit everything, make sure you can get your clips or whatever is the fastening method for your sink.
Sloping it forward so that when the slab goes on, the drips will travel forward and out. And the back of the tile is white because it is back buttered. I have smeared mortar into the back of the tile. That increases adhesion. Just using silicone caulk on these other pieces. If you're in a real hurry to make a sanded edge of granite look kind of like it's a polished edge, then you can smear some caulk on it.
For my toekick material, and I've marked where the metal brackets are. So these self-drilling drywall screws that I found in a dumpster like 6 years ago when I was getting food out of a dumpster so I can have free groceries, those are going to drill into the steel brackets. Okay, I've got my backsplashes just sitting up here for the edges. I've got this cut and previously bent portion of the sink hammered fairly flat, most of the old residue cleaned off. I got my baggie of little installation hardware with purchased on the clearance rack granite specific silicone seal. I don't know what's so granity about it. Got my granite bottoms and surrounds installed in here. Looks a lot nicer in person than it does in this dark environment. And got some removing tools ready to go. The backer board attachment to attach the rear, to attach to the wall and attach the cabinet to. Got that ready to go. Now I gotta make something that's about 1 centimeter thick that goes along the edge of here and along the rear, and I guess somewhere along the center. And that'll be my wall spacer, because it looks like you're supposed to put a spacer here, otherwise the drawers wobble and they can scratch the wall. That would be annoying, especially with this little finish nail scraping against the wall. So apparently this isn't the best kind of granite for kitchen counters because it's going to rust. You'll see some black spots with a particular sheen, and this is a magnet, and it sticks to all the black spots. And even ones that you can't see on the surface. Like, that's some serious, like, stickage there. There's a lot of iron in here. Like, big, fat chunks of iron. And, the ones on the surface are going to rust. Someday.
Well, that's the build. Boy, I was happy when that was over. Now for the install. Okay. I'm just going to throw a bunch of footage up here. It's 6 p.m. I haven't done anything productive for the day except for pick up some free commercial doors and door frames. Which, you know, that's not too bad, eh? But I want to get working on my shed. My housemate is depending on me to get a shed built. So, I'm going to rush through this video editing. Feel free to ask me any questions. Drilling holes. That's a low-tech stud finding method. Yo, bucket. Bucket, man. Let's do this, bro. Crunch, those Harbor Freight mover bearing just blew. Those things are designed to fail on you. Since then, I've welded up my own mover with like decent casters on it, and never have to re-buy those planned obsolescence Harbor Freight movers again. That black tank tread looking mover there will take 10 tons. Just 3 of those allowed me to move a double wide trailer together by myself. Interestingly, I had just not had knee pads on. I went and purchased knee pads at the Harbor Freight that is a block away from this location. And I had ground the bone in my knee, and that pain lasted for months. I wasn't sure if it was going to go away in my lifetime. I'm not sure how many months it lasted, but it was a long time. I was just trying to get that like 600-pound unit inside of the door, and I was putting the pressure on the concrete on my knees. Looks like I'm getting a phone call. And those are like vinyl pick and peel and stick tiles there that are trying to keep the good floor from being scratched up. You'll notice the differently colored tile in the rear. That's because there was only so much of that red tile. It was $500 for all those red tiles on Craigslist, and there wasn't quite enough to totally finish the job. But fortunately, it was a kitchen, so there's a part of the kitchen where you're not going to see. So I just used a different species of granite to fill the rest in. Got pretty lucky there. These adjustable feet are so overkill, it is ridiculous. I love it. They are never going to rot. The nuts won't rust. Some of the grade 8 bolts might rust someday to some degree, but they shouldn't really. Significant degree. So this unit should last a while, except for maybe that particle board. Don't give those damn bugs no place to run. Motherfuckers better die. That wall was about a 1/4 inch out of flatness, and I was pretty lucky it was only that bad. I'm using clear on the ground because people might see that caulk line, and clear seems to go well between two stones without being obvious. You know, a lot of work went into putting in that floor and that countertop, and the guy who moved in here basically said about it, "Well, it's easy to clean, that's what I want." And then later he said, "Yeah, it reminds me of something from the Middle East." Oh, totally lost on him. A lot of people just don't care. But at the end of the day, at least we know one thing that's important after all this hard work is done. And that is, you didn't build that. Somebody else built that.